I'm Jessica Miller, 21, female. I've just started my life as a high school English teacher in a small, quiet town, renting an even smaller apartment that I'm incredibly proud of. For the first time, I feel like a real adult, carefully budgeting my modest salary, paying my bills on time, and even managing to save a little. But just as I was settling into this new chapter, my family decided to write a plot twist for me, one that involved tropical islands, secret conversations, and a price tag that was meant to shatter my future. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. The Sunday dinner at my parents' house started like any other. The air was thick with the comforting scent of my mom's roast chicken, and the low hum of conversation filled the dining room. My dad, David, was recounting a story about a stubborn pipe he'd fixed, his hand still looking calloused and strong. My mom, Sarah, was fussing over the placement of the gravy boat, a small, nervous habit she had when she was excited about something. Across from me, my older sister, Emily, and her husband, Ben, were whispering to each other, shooting conspiratorial glances at me that I initially mistook for affection. I was happy. It had been a grueling first 2 months of teaching, lesson plans, parent-teacher conferences, and trying to get 100 teenagers to appreciate Shakespeare. Being here felt like coming up for air. I had just finished telling them about a particularly funny moment in my 9th grade class when my mom clapped her hands together, her eyes sparkling. "Okay, everyone," she announced, her voice a little too loud. "We have some wonderful, wonderful news to share with Jessica." Emily grinned, reaching across the table to grab my hand. "We've been planning something huge, Jess, something for all of us. A real family vacation to make up for all the years we couldn't afford one." Ben puffed out his chest. "We're talking top tier, the best of the best, because we deserve it." My heart did a little flutter. A vacation. We hadn't been on a real family trip since I was 10, and that was just a weekend camping trip 2 hours away. The idea of all of us getting away together sounded incredible. "Wow, that's amazing. Where are we thinking of going?" "Not thinking," Emily corrected, her smile widening. "It's already planned. We're going to Hawaii." My mom unveiled a glossy travel brochure from a drawer in the dining room hutch and slid it across the table. The cover showed a pristine white, sand beach, impossibly turquoise water, and a couple silhouetted against a fiery sunset. It looked like a postcard from a dream. The headline read, "Maui's Ultimate Luxury Experience. 2 whole weeks." My dad said, a rare, wide smile on his face, "We've wanted to take you kids forever. Now that you're both grown and settled, it just feels like the right time." I felt a warmth spread through my chest. They had planned this for me, for us. It was so thoughtful. I was so focused on my new career and my tight budget that I hadn't even considered a vacation. I'm speechless. This is the nicest thing ever. When are we going? 3 weeks from today. Ben said, "Flights are booked, hotels are reserved, everything is set." A tiny alarm bell went off in my head. 3 weeks as a first-year teacher, getting 2 consecutive weeks off during the school year was virtually impossible. Wait, 3 weeks? I'm not sure I can get the time off work. I'm brand new, and I've used up my personal days with that flu I had last month. My mom waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, don't you worry about that, honey. We already thought of it. It's the week before your school's spring break and the week of spring break itself. Your father called the school district office. They said a new teacher could take an unpaid week for a family emergency or a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity." It felt a bit presumptuous, them calling my employer, but the excitement in the room was so infectious that I pushed the feeling down. They were just trying to be helpful. They were so happy, and I didn't want to be the one to ruin it. Maybe I could make it work. An unpaid week would hurt my budget badly, but for a family trip to Hawaii, maybe it was worth it. "They've planned everything, Jess," Emily added, flipping through the brochure. A 5-star resort, a private villa, snorkeling tours, a traditional luau on the beach, even a helicopter tour of the island. It sounded incredibly expensive. More than a little alarm bell, a siren was starting to wail in my mind. My sister and Ben weren't exactly wealthy. She was a barista at a local coffee shop, and he managed a shoe store at the mall. My parents were comfortable but lived on a modest retirement income. How on earth could they afford a trip of this magnitude? "This sounds really extravagant," I said carefully, trying not to sound ungrateful. "Are you guys sure about this?" "Of course, we're sure." Ben laughed. You only live once, right? We've got it all handled." For the rest of the dinner, they talked endlessly about Hawaii. They described the infinity pool at the resort, the fresh pineapple we'd eat for breakfast, and the sea turtles we would see. It all felt surreal, a fantasy life that didn't quite mesh with the reality of our family's finances. I tried to ask practical questions about the costs and how they were managing it, but they always deflected with a vague, "Don't worry about it, it's all taken care of." I left my parents' house that night with a mix of excitement and deep-seated anxiety. It was a dream come true, but it was a dream I couldn't quite understand. The details were fuzzy, the finances were a mystery, and the whole thing felt like a beautiful picture with something crucial missing from the frame. I just couldn't see it yet. I told myself I was overthinking it. This was my family. They loved me. They were doing something wonderful for all of us. I chose to trust them. That was my first mistake. The other shoe dropped 4 days later. I was invited over for dinner again, this time under the pretense of finalizing the travel details. I walked in with a plate of brownies and a genuine sense of anticipation. The anxiety from Sunday had faded, replaced by the cautious optimism of a 21-year-old about to go on her first real vacation. The atmosphere was different this time. It was less celebratory and more business. My mom seemed nervous, constantly wringing her hands. Emily and Ben were sitting on the sofa, radiating an unnerving level of smug confidence. My dad was unusually quiet, staring at the television even though it was off. "Jessica, honey, sit down," my mom said, gesturing to the armchair opposite the sofa. "Ben has something he wants to go over with us." Ben cleared his throat and picked up a sleek leather portfolio from the coffee table. He opened it with a flourish, revealing a multi-page, professionally printed document. He slid it across the table to me. The cover page read, "Miller Family Hawaiian Paradise Itinerary and Expense Report." My stomach clenched. "An expense report, so, Jess," Ben began, leaning forward in his seat like a seasoned salesman about to close a deal. "We wanted to be fully transparent about the costs so everyone is on the same page. We've spared no expense to make this the trip of a lifetime." I opened the document. The first page was a detailed itinerary, listing everything they'd mentioned on Sunday: the helicopter tour, the private surfing lessons, the 5-course tasting menu at a Michelin-starred restaurant. It was more luxurious than I could have ever imagined. Then I turned the page. The second page was the budget breakdown. My eyes scanned the numbers, and the air left my lungs in a silent rush. First class round, trip airfare 5 adults, $35,000 ocean. Front private villa 14 nights, $84,000 private chef and catering services, $28,000 tours, activities and excursions, $42,500 shopping and miscellaneous fund, $20,000. There were more lines, but my brain had stopped processing them. At the bottom of the page, in a large, bold font, was the grand total, $250,000. I stared at the number, convinced it was a typo. $250,000. That was more than the value of my parents' house. I felt a wave of nausea. This has to be a mistake. I stammered, looking up from the pages. My voice was a thin whisper. $250,000, how? Emily scoffed, rolling her eyes. "It's a luxury trip, Jessica. That's what these things cost. We didn't want to scrape by in some cheap motel. This is about making memories. But we can't afford this," I said, my voice gaining a desperate edge. I looked at my parents. My dad wouldn't meet my eyes. My mom was staring at a spot on the carpet. "Mom, Dad, how are we paying for this?" Ben cleared his throat again, a predatory gleam in his eye. "Well, that's the best part. We've all agreed to chip in. We're a family, after all. We pull our weight." He flipped to the last page of the document. It was titled Contribution Agreement. It had our names listed, and next to them, a dollar amount. My parents, Sarah and David, were listed for $50,000. Emily and Ben were listed for $50,000, and then I saw my name, Jessica Miller, $50,000. The room went silent. The number pulsed on the page, mocking me. $50,000. I made less than that in an entire year before taxes. My savings account, which I had been so proud of, held exactly $4,200. The idea was so ludicrous, so completely detached from my reality, that for a moment I thought it was a cruel, elaborate joke. I started to laugh. It was a hollow, broken sound. $50,000 from me. Is this a joke? Why would it be a joke? Emily snapped, her voice sharp and defensive. You're the one with the stable career now. You're a high school teacher. You have a salary, benefits, a pension. Ben and I are just scraping by. We figured you'd be happy to finally contribute properly. The words hit me like a slap in the face. Finally contribute properly, as if my years of working part-time jobs through college to pay my own tuition, to avoid being a burden, meant nothing. Emily, I make $48,000 a year, before taxes, I said, my voice trembling with a mixture of rage and disbelief. I live paycheck to paycheck. I have student loans. I don't have $50,000. I don't have $5,000 to spare. Where in God's name do you think I would get that kind of money? And my mother finally spoke, her voice soft and pleading. We thought you could take out a loan, honey, for the family. It's an investment in our happiness. An investment. They wanted me to go into crippling debt for a 2-week vacation that I was never even asked if I wanted to go on. They hadn't planned a trip for me. They had planned a trip funded by me. I was the missing piece of their financial puzzle. I wasn't a daughter or a sister in that moment. I was a walking, talking bank account they thought they could cash in. No, I said, the word feeling foreign and powerful on my tongue. Absolutely not. I can't and I won't. The atmosphere in the room turned frigid. Emily's face contorted with fury. I can't believe you're being so selfish. After everything we've done for you, what have you done for me? I shot back, standing up. The glossy pages of the expense report crumpled in my fist. What is this? You planned $250,000 vacation without me and then handed me a bill for $50,000. That's not a gift. That's extortion. Ben stood up too. Now hold on. We're a family and you're going to pay your share. My share of what? My share of a fantasy you cooked up without my consent. I looked at my parents, my heart breaking. Mom, Dad, did you know about this? Did you agree to this? My dad finally looked at me, his eyes filled with shame. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible shake of his head. My mom just started to cry silently. In that moment, I understood. This was Emily and Ben's scheme, and they had somehow convinced my mother to go along with it, cornering my father in the process. I dropped the crumpled papers on the coffee table. I'm not paying it, I said, my voice now firm and cold. I'm sorry, but this is insane. You need to cancel this trip. We can't cancel it. Emily shrieked. Everything is non-refundable. You'll ruin everything. Then you better figure out how to pay for it, I said, walking towards the door. Because my name isn't on your loan application. I left their house with the sound of my sister's yelling and my mother's sobbing echoing behind me. The brownies I brought were still sitting on the kitchen counter, a sweet, forgotten token of a family I no longer recognized. My heart didn't just feel broken, it felt like it had been scammed. The days following the disastrous expense report, dinner were a torment of silence and pressure. My phone was a battlefield. Emily sent a barrage of texts, alternating between rage-filled accusations and guilt, tripping messages about how I was tearing the family apart. Ben sent me links to personal loan websites, as if that were a helpful suggestion. My mom's texts were the worst, short, pleading messages filled with crying emojis, begging me to reconsider for the sake of peace. The only person I didn't hear from was my dad. His silence was a heavy, suffocating blanket. I felt lost, isolated in my tiny apartment. Was I the crazy one? Was I being selfish? They had woven such a convincing narrative of family unity and shared dreams that my refusal felt like a betrayal. But every time I thought about that $50,000 price tag, a cold, hard certainty settled in my gut. This was wrong. I'd worked too hard to build my small, stable life just to have it demolished for a 2-week fantasy. The breaking point came on a Friday night, a week after the confrontation. My dad called me. His voice was strained, heavy with an exhaustion that went beyond physical tiredness. "Jessie," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Can you come over? Your mother is. She's not doing well. She won't stop crying, and Emily is here making everything worse. I need you here. Maybe you can talk some sense into them." A part of me wanted to say no, to protect myself from another onslaught. But the plea in my dad's voice was undeniable. He sounded like he was drowning. "Okay, Dad, I'll be there in 20 minutes. When I arrived, the house was thick with tension. My mom was on the sofa, wrapped in a blanket, her face pale and tear-stained. Emily was pacing the living room floor, her phone pressed to her ear. "No, I understand," she was saying, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "We're just waiting on one final payment to clear. Of course, the presidential suite is still confirmed." She hung up and glared at me as I walked in. "Look what the cat dragged in," she sneered. "Come to gloat over the mess you've made." "I came because Dad asked me to," I said calmly, ignoring her. I sat down next to my mom. "Mom, what's wrong? We can talk about this." "It's all ruined, Jessica," she sobbed. "The dream is ruined." Before I could respond, my dad came into the room, holding his tablet. "Jessie, the darn Wi-Fi is acting up again. Can you take a look? You're better with this tech stuff." He looked flustered, and I realized it was just a pretext to get me away from the brewing storm in the living room. "Sure, Dad." I took the tablet and went to the kitchen, happy for the excuse to escape. I fiddled with the Wi-Fi settings, quickly reconnecting it. As the connection re-established, the screen lit up with a stream of notifications. Most were news alerts and emails, but one caught my eye. It was from a messaging app, a group chat notification that popped up at the top of the screen. The group was named Ohana Hawaii Trip. The preview text read, "Emily, ugh, she's here now, everyone be cool." Remember the plan. My blood ran cold. Ohana, the Hawaiian word for family, a family group chat about the trip that I, a member of the family, was not in. My heart started pounding against my ribs, a frantic trapped bird. My hands were shaking, but I clicked on the notification. I had to know. The app opened, and the chat history flooded the screen. It was all there. 6 weeks of messages, 6 weeks of planning, scheming, and deceiving. 6 weeks of my own family plotting behind my back. I scrolled up to the very beginning. The first message was from Emily to my mom, Ben, and my dad. "Emily, 6 weeks ago. Okay, so I had the most amazing idea. Ben and I saw this insane package deal for a luxury Hawaii trip. It's crazy expensive, but I think I know how we can pay for it. Jessica." My breath hitched. It was worse than I thought. I wasn't an afterthought. I was the entire plan from the very beginning. I kept reading, my disgust and horror growing with every message. Ben, 6 weeks ago, her teacher salary just kicked in. She's probably got a ton of cash saved up from not having any fun in college. It's perfect. Mom, 6 weeks ago. Oh, I don't know. It seems like a lot to ask of her. She's just starting out. Emily, 6 weeks ago. Mom, don't be a pushover. She owes us. We supported her through school. It's time for her to pay it back. Think of it as a family investment. She invests in us. We get a great vacation. It's a win-win. I felt a bitter taste rise in my throat. Supported me. I paid my own way. They had me over for Sunday dinners. That was the extent of their support. I scrolled through weeks of them picking out the most expensive options for everything, laughing about how Jessie's treat was going to be epic. They debated the best way to present the bill to me. They decided to frame it as a surprise gift first, to get my emotions invested before revealing the cost. It was a calculated, manipulative strategy. They talked about me as if I were a stranger, a resource to be exploited. They made fun of my frugal habits, my sensible car, my small apartment. They saw my financial discipline not as a sign of responsibility, but as a stockpile of cash they were entitled to. Emily, 3 weeks ago. Make sure you guys really play up the once in a lifetime angle. Make her feel like she'll be the villain if she says no. Ben, 3 weeks ago. My man. Will lay the guilt on so thick she won't be able to refuse. The most painful part was seeing my parents' messages. My mom, initially hesitant, was slowly worn down by Emily's relentless pressure until she became an active participant, suggesting ways to make the trip sound even more appealing to me. My dad's contributions were sparse. He'd reply with a simple okay or sounds good, but he never once stood up for me. He never once said, "This is wrong." His silence in the chat was as damning as their words. I sat there at the kitchen table, the tablet's glow illuminating my stunned face. The whole world seemed to fall away. The sounds of the argument in the living room faded into a dull roar. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a misguided attempt at a family vacation. This was a deliberate, cold-blooded conspiracy to use me. My heartbreak began to curdle, hardening into something else. It was a cold, sharp, and intensely clarifying anger. They thought I was their naive little sister, their dutiful daughter, their personal ATM. They had underestimated me. They had no idea who I really was, and I was about to show them. I quietly took screenshots of the most incriminating messages, sending them to my own phone before deleting the evidence of my snooping from the tablet. Then I stood up and walked back into the living room, my expression a calm, unreadable mask. The plan had already started to form in my mind. Walking back into the living room was like stepping onto a stage. The players were all in position, my distraught mother, my furious sister, her smug husband, and my defeated father. They all looked at me, expecting a decision. They expected me to break down, to capitulate, to sign up for a decade of debt to fund their delusion. They saw the 21-year-old girl they thought they knew. They didn't see the fire that had just been ignited by the fuel of their betrayal. I handed the tablet back to my dad. The Wi-Fi is fixed, I said, my voice steady and devoid of emotion. Emily immediately pounced. Great. Now that the technical difficulties are handled, can we get back to the financial ones? Have you decided to stop being a child and take responsibility for your family? I looked her directly in the eye. A slow, deliberate smile spread across my face. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the kind of smile that promised a reckoning. The change in my demeanor was so abrupt that it momentarily silenced her. You know what, Emily, you're right, I said, the words tasting like poison and power. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. You've all put so much thought into this. I was being selfish. The shift in the room was instantaneous. My mom's sobbing hitched and then stopped. A look of profound relief washed over her face. Ben's smug smirk returned wider than before. Emily's eyes narrowed, suspicious of my sudden reversal, but the allure of getting what she wanted was too strong to resist. My dad just looked confused. I'm so glad you understand, honey, my mom whispered, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. So you'll pay. Ben pressed, unable to hide his eagerness. I will handle my share, I said, choosing my words with surgical precision. I just need all the booking information, the confirmation numbers for the flights, the hotel, the name of the travel agent you used. I prefer to handle my finances directly with the vendors. I don't want to just hand over a check. This seemed like a reasonable request. In their minds, it was just a logistical step. Ben, puffed up with his victory, immediately agreed. Of course, full transparency. He declared, as if he hadn't just tried to ambush me with $50 bill. I'll forward you all the emails. Everything is under my name, but I'll give the agent a heads up that you'll be calling to arrange payment for your portion. Perfect, I said, my smile never wavering. Thank you for being so understanding. The relief in the room was so thick you could taste it. They thought they had won. They thought their pressure tactics and emotional manipulation had worked. For the rest of the evening, they were cloyingly sweet to me, talking about how much fun we were going to have and how this would bring us all closer together. I played along, nodding and smiling, feeling like a spy in my own family. Each kind word they spoke was another log on the fire of my resolve. I went home that night and laid out my battle plan. The screenshots from the Ohana chat were my evidence, my moral compass. I reread the whispers and the schemes, letting the sting of each word fuel my determination. This wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about respect. It was about proving that I was not the fool they took me for. The next morning, the promised email from Ben arrived. It was a treasure trove of their arrogance. He had forwarded everything, the complete, unredacted confirmation from the airline, the luxury travel agency, the resort in Maui, and the concierge service that had booked all the tours. He had even included a scanned copy of the travel insurance policy. As I scanned the documents, I noticed a critical detail they had overlooked in their haste. To secure the top-tier package and get certain perks, they had needed someone with an excellent credit score. Ben and Emily's was mediocre at best, and my parents had very little credit history. So, they had listed me as the primary traveler on several of the key bookings, the villa specifically, and used my name and information, forging my signature on a digital authorization form, likely assuming I'd just pay and never find out. They had used my good name to build their castle of lies. This was the crack in their fortress. This was my way in. I spent the entire weekend on the phone. My first call was to a friend of a friend who was a paralegal. I explained the situation hypothetically, focusing on the unauthorized use of my name and forged digital signature on a financial agreement for the villa. She confirmed that it was a serious issue and that the booking was likely unenforceable from my end. Legally, I was in the clear. Morally, I was about to go on the offensive. My second call was to the travel agent, a woman named Cynthia. I was polite, calm, and professional. I introduced myself as Jessica Miller and explained that there had been a grave misunderstanding. Regarding the Miller family booking, I understand my brother-in-law Ben has booked a significant package, I began. However, he seems to have mistakenly assumed I would be contributing $50,000 to this trip. I'm a 21-year-old public school teacher. A contribution of that size is, of course, impossible for me. I'm calling to officially inform you that I will not be paying any portion of this package. There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. Cynthia said slowly. Mr. Henderson had assured me all parties were in agreement. Unfortunately, he was mistaken, I said smoothly. Furthermore, I've noticed that my name is listed as the primary guest on the villa reservation, and there's a digital authorization that I certainly did not sign. I need that reservation either cancelled or transferred entirely out of my name immediately, as I will not be held liable for it. The agent's tone shifted from confused to alarmed. The words "not signed" and "liable" are magic spells in the customer service world. She promised to look into it immediately. My next calls were to the airline and the concierge service. I told them the same story. I was not a financial party to this trip. Any bookings made in my name were to be reviewed. Since the first-class tickets were all booked as a group of 5, my cancellation would trigger a repricing of their entire package. The group discount would be void. The dominoes were beginning to line up. I was meticulous. I documented every call, noting the time, date, and the name of the person I spoke with. I followed up each call with a polite but firm email, creating a paper trail that would be impossible to deny. They had whispered for 6 weeks behind my back. I was dismantling their dream with a few days of open, honest, and devastating phone calls. They had built their plan on the assumption of my weakness, my compliance, and my silence. They never once considered that I might have a voice of my own. While the foundations of their Hawaiian fantasy were crumbling, I started building a new reality for myself. The anger that had propelled me through the weekend of phone calls began to subside, leaving behind a clear, cold sense of purpose. This was no longer just about stopping their trip. It was about reclaiming my own life and my own happiness, which they had so casually tried to hijack. The thought of them stranded in the mess of their own making brought me a grim satisfaction, but I knew that true victory wouldn't be found in their failure alone. It would be found in my own triumph. Their grand plan involved me taking a week of unpaid leave, followed by spring break. That was 2 weeks of my time they had already factored in, and I decided I was going to use it. Not to sit at home stewing in resentment, but to give myself the vacation I actually deserved. And, more importantly, the one I could afford. I opened my laptop and started planning. Their itinerary had been about excess, status, and showing off. Mine would be about peace, reflection, and genuine experience. I had always dreamed of seeing the great national parks out west. I imagined vast canyons, towering forests, and silent, star-filled nights. It was the antithesis of their noisy, ostentatious, 5-star resort fantasy. My budget was the $200 I had in my savings, the very money they had mocked as my little pile of cash. I became my own travel agent, hunting for deals with the same ferocity they had hunted for luxuries. I booked a round-trip flight to Salt Lake City for a fraction of what one of their first-class tickets to Hawaii would have cost. I rented a small, reliable sedan, not a luxury SUV. I mapped out a 10-day road trip through Utah and Arizona, linking together Zion, Bryce Canyon, and the Grand Canyon. Instead of a private villa with a personal chef, I booked rooms in modest, clean motels just outside the park entrances and charming little airbnb cabins. I packed a cooler for lunches on the trail and a thermos for hot coffee at sunrise. My tasting menu would be a sandwich eaten on a cliff edge overlooking 1,000,000 years of geological history. My helicopter tour would be a strenuous hike to a viewpoint that I reached with my own 2 feet. The total cost of my entire 10-day tripping, including flights, car rental, gas, lodging, park passes, and food, came to just under $2,000. It was a responsible, achievable, and deeply personal adventure. I would spend the rest of my 2-week break back home, resting and preparing for the rest of the school year, with more than half of my savings still intact. As I made my own reservations, a profound sense of calm settled over me. I wasn't just canceling their plans, I was creating my own. I was taking the narrative they had tried to write for me, tearing out the pages and starting a new chapter. Meanwhile, the fallout from my calls was beginning. I received a panicked email from Cynthia, the travel agent. She informed me that since I was contesting the authorization for the villa, the booking had been flagged as potentially fraudulent. The resort had a strict policy and had canceled the reservation pending a full investigation. The non-refundable deposit, a staggering $25,000 paid on Ben's credit card, was now in jeopardy. Furthermore, with my flight ticket cancelled, the airline had indeed repriced the remaining 4 tickets, and the cost for each had jumped significantly. The package deal was unraveling thread by thread. The best part was, my family was completely oblivious. They were still wrapped in their cocoon of blissful ignorance, thinking I was at home applying for personal loans. Emily sent me a text message on Tuesday afternoon. Emily, hey, hope the payment stuff is going okay. I saw the most amazing pair of designer sandals that would be perfect for our luau. Let me know when your funds clear. Can't wait. So I read the message and smiled. The sheer, unadulterated entitlement was almost impressive. I typed back a simple, cheerful reply. Jessica, all handled on my end, just finalizing a few things. We should all get together for dinner on Friday to go over the final checklist. It was the perfect bait. A final checklist meeting would sound completely normal to them. For me, it was the curtain call. It was the stage I was setting for the final act of their self-produced drama. I booked a private room at a local mid-range restaurant, a neutral ground where they couldn't control the environment. I wanted witnesses. I wanted a public but contained setting where screaming and hysterics would be frowned upon. My own travel itinerary was printed and placed in a crisp new folder. My bank statements showing my modest income and savings were tucked in behind it. And on my phone, saved and ready, were the screenshots from the Ohana group chat. They thought we were meeting to plan our trip to paradise. In reality, they were walking into an audit of their character, and I was the one holding the ledger. My own trip wasn't just a vacation, it was my declaration of independence. It was proof that I didn't need their extravagant, debt-fueled definition of happiness. I was about to find my own paradise, while they were about to discover that their dream vacation had just been foreclosed on. Friday night arrived, cloaked in a deceptive calm. I got to the restaurant early, choosing a table in the corner of the private room I had reserved. I arranged 4 crisp, white envelopes on the table, one in front of each empty chair. I ordered a glass of water and waited, my heart beating a steady, determined rhythm. There were no nerves, no fear, just a cold, resolute clarity. They arrived together, a united front of blissful ignorance. My mom was beaming, my dad looked more relaxed than he had in weeks, and Emily and Ben walked in with the swagger of conquering heroes. Jessica, you're already here. My mom chirped, kissing me on the cheek. I'm so excited I can barely stand it. I've been buying sunscreen all week. This is great, Jess, Ben said, clapping me on the shoulder as he sat down. Glad you came to your senses. Knew you would. You're a smart girl. I smiled faintly. I just wanted to make sure we were all aligned before the trip. There are a few things to go over. They settled into their seats, eagerly anticipating a conversation about packing lists and flight times. Emily picked up the envelope in front of her. Ooh, what's this? Did you print out the final itinerary for us? She asked, her voice laced with condescension as if I were her personal assistant. Something like that, I replied. Why don't you all open them together? With a rustle of paper, they opened their envelopes. Their expressions shifted in a slow, cascading wave of confusion, then shock, then pure, unadulterated horror. Inside each envelope were identical printouts, screenshots of the Ohana Hawaii trip group chat. I had curated the worst of it, Emily's initial message about using me as their funding source, Ben's comments about my ton of cash, their jokes about my frugal lifestyle. The calculated plan to emotionally manipulate me, my mother's eventual complicity. It was all there in black and white. The silence that fell over the table was absolute. The color drained from my mother's face. Ben's jaw went slack, his confident facade crumbling into dust. Emily stared at the pages, her eyes darting back and forth, as if willing the words to disappear. My dad closed his eyes, his face a mask of profound shame. Where did you get these? Emily whispered, her voice trembling. Does it matter? I asked, my own voice quiet but carrying the weight of a judge's gavel. You wrote them, you thought them, you planned it all. For 6 weeks, you schemed behind my back, not to give me a gift, but to saddle me with a lifetime of debt for your own selfish fantasy. You didn't see me as a daughter or a sister. You saw me as a solution to a financial problem. My mom started to cry, not the performative sobs from before, but silent, genuine tears of shame. Jessica, it wasn't like that, wasn't it? I countered, my gaze unwavering. The evidence seems to suggest it was exactly like that. You called my responsible habits a pile of cash for you to spend. You planned to lay on the guilt so thick I couldn't refuse. Do you have any idea how that feels, to know your own family views your hard-earned security as their personal slush fund? I let the words hang in the air, letting them absorb the full weight of their betrayal. Ben was the first to recover, his shock morphing into blustering anger. You went through your dad's private messages. That's a disgusting invasion of privacy. And what would you call using my name and forging my signature to secure a villa you couldn't afford? I shot back. What would you call planning a $250,000 trip on the assumption of my income without my consent? Let's not talk about invasions, Ben, because you won't win. I turned my attention to the table. So, let's get to the rest of the final checklist. Item number 1, the villa, cancelled. I informed the resort that the signature on the authorization form was not mine. They are investigating it as a potential fraud. Your $25,000 non-refundable deposit is, as of now, forfeited. Emily let out a small gasp. Item number 2, the flights. My first-class ticket, the one I never agreed to buy, has been cancelled. As it turns out, cancelling one ticket from a group package voids the discounted rate for the rest. The airline will be contacting you with the new, much higher price for your remaining 4 tickets. Ben's face went from pale to a sickly green. Item number 3, the tours, the private chef, the concierge services, all booked through the travel agency and tied to the villa reservation. With the villa cancelled, the entire package has been voided. All of your other non-refundable deposits are also gone. I leaned back in my chair and took a calm sip of water. So, to summarize, your dream vacation to Hawaii is cancelled. You have lost, by my estimation, somewhere between $30,000 and $40,000 in non-refundable deposits. And you have a very awkward conversation ahead with your credit card company about that fraud investigation. Emily finally found her voice, and it was filled with venom. You did this. You destroyed our trip, you monster. No, Emily, I said, my voice as cold as ice. I didn't do this. I just refused to pay for it. You did this when you decided I was a bank instead of a sister. You built this entire fantasy on a foundation of lies and entitlement. I just kicked out the support beam. The rest of it came crashing down all on its own. I slid my own travel folder across the table, and finally, for my last agenda item, my travel plans. Ben snatched it and opened it. He saw the flight confirmations to Salt Lake City, the car rental agreement, the motel bookings. He saw the budget, neatly calculated at the bottom, $1,987. While you were planning how to spend my money, I was planning a trip I could actually afford, a trip that I wanted. I'm leaving tomorrow morning for 10 days. I'll be hiking, exploring, and enjoying the peace and quiet. I will have my phone off for the duration of the trip, so don't bother calling. I stood up, placing a $20 bill on the table to cover my water. This was your dream, not mine. You can have it. You can also have the consequences. I looked at my parents. My mom couldn't look at me. My dad finally met my gaze, and in his eyes I saw a universe of regret. It was too little, too late. I hope it was worth it, I said to all of them. Then I turned and walked out of the restaurant, leaving them sitting in the ruins of their Hawaiian dream, with nothing but a pile of incriminating screenshots and a mountain of debt. I didn't look back. The next morning, as the sun was just beginning to cast a pale, pink glow over the horizon, I was on a plane heading west. The feeling of the wheels lifting off the runway felt like a physical severing of ties. With every foot of altitude we gained, the weight on my shoulders lessened. I didn't feel sad or angry anymore. I just felt light. My 10-day road trip was a revelation. It was a pilgrimage back to myself. Standing on the edge of Bryce Canyon, looking out at the endless sea of hoodoos glowing orange in the morning light, the drama with my family felt small and insignificant. Hiking the Narrows in Zion, with the cool water rushing around my ankles and ancient canyon walls towering above me, I felt a sense of peace that no 5-star resort could ever offer. There was no private chef, but a hot cup of coffee brewed on a camp stove while watching the sunrise over the Grand Canyon was the most delicious meal I'd ever had. There was no infinity pool, but swimming in a crystal, clear, ice-cold mountain lake was infinitely more refreshing. I was disconnected from the world they lived in, the world of status, appearances, and what other people thought. I was connected to something real, something tangible, the earth beneath my feet, the air in my lungs. the quiet strength I was discovering within myself. When I finally turned my phone back on at the airport for my flight home, it was exactly as I expected, a deluge, dozens of missed calls from all of them. Voicemails that ranged from screaming and threatening Emily and Ben to weeping and pleading my mother. The text messages were a novel of their despair. Ben, you have ruined us. The credit card company put a hold on our account. We're out over $40K. You will pay for this, Jessica. Emily, I hope you're happy. I hope your stupid camping trip was worth destroying your family. Don't ever speak to me again. Mom, Jessica, please call me. We made a terrible mistake. I am so sorry. I miss you. Please just let us know you're safe. There was one message from my dad sent just that morning. It was different from the others. Dad, Jesse, I know you're not reading these, but I'm sending it anyway. You were right. I was a coward. I stood by and let it happen, and I will regret it for the rest of my life. I have told your mother and Emily that I will not be discussing this with them anymore. The fault is ours and ours alone. I hope one day you can forgive me. If not, I understand. I'm proud of the woman you've become. His message was the only one that gave me pause. It was the only one that sounded like an acknowledgement of the truth. But forgiveness felt like a distant country I wasn't ready to visit yet. The aftermath was messy. Emily and Ben had to take out a massive loan to cover their credit card debt and the lost deposits. Their financial situation, already precarious, was now disastrous. According to a cousin who called to get my side of the story, they were fighting constantly, the stress of the financial ruin exposing the cracks in their relationship. The dream vacation they thought would elevate their status had ended up bankrupting them, both financially and morally. My relationship with my mother was fractured, perhaps irreparably. Her apologies felt hollow, tainted by the fact that she was only sorry because they had gotten caught. She couldn't understand why I couldn't just get over it for the family. She didn't grasp that they had broken my trust, a thing far more valuable than any vacation. I started seeing my dad for quiet lunches once every few weeks. We didn't talk about the trip. We talked about books, about my students, about his garden. It was a slow, fragile process of rebuilding, but it was a start. He was trying to earn back my trust, not with grand gestures, but with quiet, consistent respect. As for me, I found my paradise. It wasn't on a beach in Hawaii. It was in my small apartment, which felt more like a sanctuary than ever before. It was in my classroom with students who challenged and inspired me. It was in the knowledge that I could stand on my own 2 feet and defend my own boundaries. The $50,000 they had demanded from me became a symbol. It was the price of my freedom, a price I had refused to pay. Instead, I had invested in myself, and the returns were immeasurable. I had lost a version of my family, the one built on obligation and expectation, but I had found myself. And that was a trade I would make again in a heartbeat.